Bienvenue, mesdames et messieurs, à cette rencontre avec Nathalie Piégay et Colombe Boncenne. Des histoires d'amour et de mort, nous annonçons dans le cadre de ce festival Bibliotopia consacré aux soins, au care, mais aussi et surtout, je dirais, des histoires d'échange et d'accompagnement. Peut-être deux mots sur les deux autrices avant ensuite d'entrer dans le vif de ces deux livres dont on va parler plus en détail. Je commence avec vous, Colombe. Vous publiez votre 5e livre, Des sirènes, chez Zoé, l'éditrice chez qui vous avez fait paraître il y a 2 ans Vue Mère. Vous avez reçu pour votre tout premier roman le Prix Fénéon, c'était en 2016. Et puis vous avez publié il y a 2 ans un récit après une résidence en montagne, La mesure des larmes, qui annonce peut-être ce livre-ci. Vous faites également de la programmation littéraire, notamment pour les correspondances de Manosque. Quant à vous, Nathalie Piégay, ce nouveau récit, Le caillou noir, est votre 3e livre aux éditions du Rocher, mais vous avez publié plusieurs essais et ouvrages critiques, puisque vous êtes professeur de lettres à l'Université de Genève, spécialiste de Claude Simon, Robert Pinget et d'Aragon aussi, dont vous parlez dans un récit intitulé La femme invisible, qui a été finaliste du Renaudot en 2018. Alors, sur les soins, puisque c'est le sujet de cette manifestation, les soins et l'attention à ceux qu'on aime, on va peut-être commencer par un bref résumé des 2 livres. Revenons à vous, à Des sirènes, qui raconte plusieurs mois de la vie commune entre votre narratrice et sa mère, à qui l'on vient de diagnostiquer une leucémie. Et c'est à la fois ce livre une réflexion sur la maladie, sur les relations mère-fille, mais aussi sur la prise de parole des femmes par rapport au harcèlement et à travers la prise de conscience post-MeToo et autour d'un secret familial plus ou moins bien gardé.
As well as the realization of a family secret and the passing of time, which is a topic in common between your 2 books. Colombe, this book that was published after the passing of your mother, while she was still alive, did you already know you would be writing it? Thank you, Geneviève, for this presentation and for this question. It's a very interesting question. And maybe I'd start with saying, well, you said that this book is also about sexual abuse and harassment that women are victims of. And this is what I was wondering about when I decided to write this book. Did I really have to mention these topics or not? And maybe my mother's disease made this issue even more pressing than it was before. Now, about the experience of support and care, I'd be curious to hear what Nathalie Piégay has to say about it later on. During these 2 years I spent with my mother, I don't know whether I knew that I would be writing about it, whether I would be publishing a book about it, but there were certain moments that I experienced at that time. I was able to experience because I knew I would be writing about them. It was something that was very hard. It was almost violent. I was making a mental note of what was happening. It helped me take a step back and helped me experience what was happening less violently. So a mental note, you were making mental notes. Le caillou noir, Nathalie Piégay, is a portrait of your mother. It's exploded portrait. It's not in sequence. You're there by her side for the last week of her life in Dijon, whereas you were told that she was terminally ill for 8 months before. The time that you spend with her, she has cancer with generalized cancer. All these memories come back to your mind, memories of your childhood, her childhood, your children, your father. Colombe mentioned mental notes. Did you know you would be writing about this experience? Did you make mental notes or physical notes? No, I wasn't making notes. I wasn't taking notes. And I had no idea that I would be writing about this week I spent by my mother's side. On the other hand, as early as the day after her passing, I started writing. Although this is not something I had anticipated. I started writing without even thinking it would be made into a book, but I was haunted by the fact that I may forget, and that this process of forgetting had already started. So it was in the aftermath, in the immediate aftermath, that I started writing. I started writing for myself, for her own memory. During the week I spent with my mother, it was a very hard experience, although it happens very often to people. But during this week, I realized that there was something that was disorganized in my relationship to time. The days were long. I wasn't doing much. I had a hard time thinking about the future. There were no stages during the course of the day. We were thinking about the past. I was thinking about the past in a very disorganized way. And this unstructured manner of approaching the past led me to believe that the past was being triggered, memories were being triggered by this experience. I knew I would be forgetting. Fortunately enough, we forget. So I knew I would be forgetting. And forgetting bad memories is what keeps us alive, but I didn't want to forget who she was and what was going to disappear with her. I think there's something in common between your two books when they're actually very different. As you said, this experience is very common. It's never identical because people don't experience things things in similar ways, but this notion of time is what's common between your two books. Colombe, you mentioned this. You say the outside world continues to go on when your inner clock is structured around life inside the hospital. Yes, there's this elastic notion of time. It's like Play-Doh. There's the inside world and the outside world. At the hospital during these last few days, there's the experience of the hospital, the life of the hospital, which is almost a city within a city. That's at least how I perceived it. I felt I was absorbed by this place, and the outside world became something very strange when in actual fact it's the real world. So there's this person who is dying, who's breathing less and less, and the world goes on. Let's come back to Les Sirènes. I'll ask you about the title later on, but in your book, islands are present. The heroine works on the notion of islands. She met her boyfriend on an island. So there are a lot of instances of islands. And supporting your dying mother is like an island. Can you comment on this maybe, since you read the book? Yes, they're islands. They're like archipelagos of islands of moments. There's the hospital. There's the room inside the hospital, which is a closed-in space. It's very sheltered, but it's also stifling. And you sometimes wonder that the outside world can continue its course, at a rapid pace, you feel that you're entirely cast away from the rest of the world. So I do like this image of the island. It's something that I would metaphorically make my own. Islands are places where you can isolate yourself from the rest of the world. Yes, it's what's paradoxical with islands. What's curious is that your two narrators are I narrators, it seems to me, both Colombe and Nathalie. Both narrators continue to do their work. There are these two parallel lives that are very much reflected in your books. It's a little schizophrenic, isn't it? Yes, indeed, these are different places. But in our daily lives, we look towards what's going to happen. You have plans, you have planned events, appointments, and in the case of death, except in the case of a sudden death, this period of time is a period of time that is limited. Death will occur, but you just don't know when exactly. This disorganizes the way you relate to time. And I think that is why the mind it doesn't always think about the past. You focus on the present. You try thinking about the future and about the next tasks that await you, but you're disorganized in your relationship to time, and writing tries to reorganize this. Now, about disease and care, death throes. You have two very different approaches. You tend to describe things more clinically. You look at the effects and the consequences that you make very raw descriptions of, whereas you, Colombe, your approach is slightly different. Was it because you wanted to speak about sexual abuses, child abuse, and the fact that the mother's death is a trigger? Is that why these clinical descriptions don't occur in your book? Well, I hadn't thought about it this way. I think you may be right. What was important to me was to describe the death throes in our experience. It lasts the same amount of time, about a week. You're both inside this experience, but then there's the daily life of the hospital, IVs that are being changed. There's the physical aspects. I was obsessed by breathing and breath. I was listening to her breathing constantly, and the way her breathing evolved over the course of this week. I tried describing the way her breathing evolved, the way she started wheezing. I listened to her breath and her breathing slowing down until it stopped. You said my descriptions were raw and brutal in a sense. I was trying to materially describe what was happening. And their slowness and brutality. I wanted to describe things without making them acceptable, without sugarcoating them, without any similes. So yes, indeed, my descriptions are clinical descriptions, not in the medical sense, but I wanted to use the right words to describe the right things, to describe the things the way they are, without sugarcoating them. There are things that are unacceptable. And it's only when I was trying to remember the beauty of life, how happy this woman was who was about to die, that I could find a lot of energy. You had a comment before we read an excerpt? It's about what's unacceptable. There's one thing that I find very striking in your book, and that's the fact that you describe the things in a way that makes us understand what happens. You experience the fact that you have to accept the unacceptable. This is something that you have to see. And this is very striking. Yes, it is very striking. And it's also part of ordinary life. It might be when you read it that you find it unacceptable. When you experience it, you have to accept it. Nathalie Piégay, could you read us the excerpt of Caillou Noir, your novel, with very specific questions? Unfortunately, there is no translation, so you will be hearing the excerpt in the original French language. This is an excerpt that wonders about the difference between grief, processing grief, and what's before grief.
À la différence du deuil et de son travail dont il était possible de tout savoir. On parlait de fin de vie, mais sans que l'on sache vraiment quand cela commençait. Et surtout, on n'évoquait jamais la fin de cette fin, les derniers moments. Si bien que l'agonie, je ne savais que ce que j'avais lu dans des romans qui en faisaient des scènes efficaces et dramatiques. Quand avait commencé pour ma mère le dernier chapitre? Quand commence-t-il? Au moment où l'on vous met à l'hôpital, aux soins palliatifs, à l'EHPAD? J'avais fini par admettre que la seule chose qu'on savait était qu'on n'en savait rien. La fin de vie pouvait être une période durable, quelques années peut-être, quelques mois, quelques semaines. Comptez en semaines plutôt qu'en mois, avait dit l'oncologue. Et à présent, c'était en jours. Pourquoi ne m'avait-on pas dit que c'était cela, l'agonie? Ce corps à corps avec l'absence, cette peur dans les yeux qui vous fait tenir, ce bleu délavé au-dessus du gouffre qui vous regarde implorant, mais retiens-moi, cette voix paisible, non, je n'ai pas mal, plus mal du tout, ni à la jambe, ni au dos. Et pour finir, ce mot parti avec les grumeaux jaunâtres du vomi et que je n'ai pas compris.
Ce mot, vous ne saurez jamais lequel c'était.
You'll never know which word it is. What do you talk about with your mother when she's close to dying? I think all situations are singular. My mother came from a family where people didn't speak a lot. So they weren't very talkative. People didn't talk about what they felt. You could talk about what you were doing, what you were about to do, but you didn't talk about your feelings. So I was there, and we didn't speak very much. And the silence was very comforting in a sense, maybe because I was used to it. It wasn't unbearable. I guess for some people it's different. It's the opportunity to say things that you've never said. For us, it wasn't the time to speak about things. That came at a later stage. That came when you wrote. Yes, absolutely. What about you, Colombe? The moments you spent with your mother, the mother who goes to visit her daughter before going to hospital to receive therapy, that was a time when they speak about things, especially about abuse. Yes, the novel stages a family secret that is revealed, but I totally agree with Nathalie Piégay. It is revealed. It isn't revealed all of a sudden because of the disease. It's perchance. It's in the middle of an ordinary conversation between the narrator and her mother. That's just the way they speak to each other. At one point, you come back to this family secret, which also affects the cousin of your mother, a father who loved his child too much. She hardly speaks about it, and it only spoken about at one point when the two of them play Scrabble together. Yes, it's the way you can name things. What's at stake is finding the right words to face a violent situation. I think literature, given the distance it entails, helps finding the right words to describe such violence. We've seen a movement of the whole of society whose mission it was to name, to put words on those situations of violence and abuse. You're talking about the Me Too movement? Yes, absolutely. And now we can speak about such assaults. We can put words on such assaults. Society surrounded such instances of assault by silence. There weren't any words to describe them, at least not for individuals, whereas a collective movement is better able to do so. When the mother speaks to her daughter, it's hard for her to mention the abuse she was victim of at the hands of her own father, because there is this reticence, this prudishness. It was something that she didn't want to experience again. It's hard to put words on a situation that is so traumatic, and collective movements help to do so. That's fortunate. And then there's the conversation between a mother and a daughter. There's this ordinary conversation that is the opportunity to discuss it. Let's come back to this mother-daughter relationship, which is quite different in both your books. This prudishness applies to the mother in your book, Nathalie Piégay. When was she born? She was born in 1939, so early on during World War II. She came from a family where things weren't talked about. Yes. I had taken notes because I was afraid to forget things. And then I started writing to be able to share this experience, and beyond the singular portrait, I wanted to talk about the ordinary life of a woman who epitomizes a modest family, a poor family where children didn't have access to education, where children didn't necessarily have the means to express themselves. They didn't have many words at their disposal to describe things. People didn't talk about themselves, and mothers had a determinate presence in the private sphere, not in public as much. What was important more than words, and in actual fact it's really strange for me to say this while speaking in public, they did. The most important word was to do, doing things. grocery shopping, gardening, washing dishes, etc. Doing was the most important things. Speaking was not. Absolutely not. And this relationship to doing things was very singular. There was an evolution between generations, from my mother's generation to my generation to my children's generation. And there are all these things that these women did that we no longer do. And what changes is also the way we describe them, the way we speak about what we're currently doing. And to me, it was very important to recall this relationship to space, time, others. And this was also something that I was afraid I might forget. Once she was unable to do anything because she was too sick, she was unable to lift her arm, grab things with her hand. Places were restricted, first to the hospital, then to the room, and then her body was unable to do things, more and more things. She wasn't able to stand up, and she wasn't able to even lift the telephone. She was no longer autonomous. And for a woman who had done things all her life and had not spoken very much, it's as if she was amputated in a sense. This is why I speak about these things that she did with her hands. It was a time when manual work was much more important than it is currently. Nowadays, we use our hands on touch screens, but it's really not the same. You can replace 10 devices with a single phone. Your phone you can use as a camera, as an alarm clock, as a notepad, as many different things. But it's only through contact to a single device. And there are so many things that we used to do with our hands that characterized a time that might disappear with the death of my mother and the women that belong to the same generation and previous generations. Would you agree to say that the mother in your case, Nathalie Piégay, is much more protective than yours? Yours doesn't seem to worry as much. She respects her daughter's autonomy and independence much more. Very interesting question. Go ahead first, Colombe.
Would I say she was protective? Less protective. Yes, I think she's less protective than Nathalie's mother. Not sure that's the word I would use. Maybe it was her concept of motherhood. It was different from Nathalie's mother. She talked about doing instead of saying. Perhaps the mother in my novel is a bit diluted, but using another concept of what it means to do things. I think that what's passed on in both books is passed on very differently, but for me, both of these characters are slightly protective, maybe in different ways. I understand what you're saying, that my mother was more, the mother in my book was more permissive, less inclined to worry. But we talked about how worry can reawaken pain. So maybe it's less that she's laxist and more that she's unable to face certain things, that there's a silence. There's an impediment. There's an impediment because I think the mother that I describe is more tender than gentle than the mother in Nathalie's book. Tenderness is a sort of protection. What do you think? I think that what we're saying is that our two books, which are very different but have things in common, is that they are books in which death has to be faced by daughters. It's not just that the people dying are women, but the fact that their daughters are the ones who are caring for them and who are present. Not very surprising in our society, says the moderator. Yes, it's very common in today's society. And that this is what is the subject of the writing, that the daughters decide to write about it. So what place is given to mothers in the text, but also what place do they give us in a world which is different from the world they grew up in, and very different from the society I live in today. And I think that this question of the issue of mother-daughter relationships is very revealing with respect to the relationship that society forces us to have of death. Death is women's business, not only in terms of daughters caring for their mothers, but also in professional health care. So in the family setting and in public life, it's the same. And I think that in writing, writing is also women's business, writing about death in preceding ages in the 19th century. The mothers dying was not the subject. The subject was men dying, and the father dying, and it was described by men. Your novel and my book are symptoms of a phenomenon which is, I think, beyond our control as individuals. What's interesting about the idea of a mother, perhaps yours being a bit more free, there's an extraordinary scene where she runs away. I'd like you to describe this scene, Colombe, because it's very revealing about this woman. Yes, she's immunosuppressed, immunodepressed, a very common term these days, much less rare in the past. She's not allowed to leave her room, which brings us back to the idea of closed-in environment. She's not allowed to leave the hospital, and she does. And it's funny because the doctors, this comes back to what you were saying, they don't shout at the daughter, but they come to see the daughter and they say, well, you should explain to your mother that she's putting herself in danger. And the daughter is torn between the institutional discourse, which is that the protocol needs to be respected, needs to be honored, observed. It's an interesting kind of vocabulary. And the mother says no. The hospital protocol, I will abide by it to the extent that I will go to the hospital for treatment, but nobody's going to lock me in. She goes out and she buys a red silk skirt that she'll never have the chance to wear. She's in pajamas, and anyway, She's not the kind of woman who would wear a red silk suit. And she hangs it up in her room, in the hospital wardrobe. And that is her final act of rebellion. Yes, that is a difference, but there is a resemblance between your two books. That is the presence of water. When we think of mothers, that's not really surprising. We have islands, we have the ocean, mermaids, and in your book, the swimming pool, because your book takes place in high summer. So perhaps we could start with you. What is the need for water in your novel? Very different for you than for your mother, who didn't know how to swim. Yes, I think the presence of water is comforting. And in the book, it's also a tool, an instrument for saying that life goes on. The river continues to flow. The lake will still be there after she's gone. It's an image of continuity and simplicity at the same time. Our relationship with water is all about recharging our batteries as well. You're correct. There is a sign of difference in water between the two characters. My mother never learned to swim, so she was very afraid of water. And she often projected her fears onto her children, worrying that we couldn't do things that she didn't know how to do. And for me, swimming was a lifeline. At the same time, I felt like I was doing something a bit naughty, and I didn't want to worry her, which is why I didn't talk about it. But your mother lived near water, near the water, yes, on an island. It's a her disease forced her to leave the island surrounded by water. And this is something which I think she genuinely missed. How can you make up for that missing water? In the book, I talk about the ocean, and my mother's friends who live on the island sent her recordings and pictures of the ocean, and you talked about breath as a rhythm, and the voice. There, I think there's a difference between the two books as well. Yours is made up of images, the black pebble, and yours is made up rather of sounds, Colombe Boncenne. The figure of the mermaid represents water, but also the voice, the chant of the mermaids. Yes, this is a motif, an connecting motif in the book, the myth of the mermaid in mythology, in Greek mythology, Nordic mythology, and then how that myth was carried over into Western tales or even modern kitsch. So this is a red thread between all of these figures. The voice. The voice of the mermaids is what constitutes their charm, although we're not really clear about what they sound like. The song of the mermaid is dangerous because it's so beautiful. So beauty is thought to be dangerous. That's something we can think about. And what is to be avoided at all costs is to hear the song. You're supposed to plug your ears, or in The Little Mermaid, she gives up her voice for the prince's love. It's a bargain she makes. So something about the mermaids' voices, women's voices. Why is it that everyone wants to shut up the mermaids? women have to shut up to exist. Yes, even to be desired, you have to be quiet. Even to be human. Did a lot of reading about mermaids. And we can wonder what they really say to Ulysses. What is it that they say that could be so dangerous? Ulysses listens to them. They seem to be telling him about the war, the Trojan War. What they're doing is telling about men, the violence of men. So maybe that's what we don't want to hear. And that is how you chose your title? It was based on the Greek myth? I was working on my novel and things that were intertwined in Mallarmé's poetry, something I read and I quoted it in as an epigraph. He's on a boat and he's supposed to be passing things on to the next generation. And he says, tel loin se noie une trompe de sirènes mainte à l'envers, a troupe of mermaids. I was fascinated by that. And there was a hiatus between the word mermaid, which is a beautiful word, and then troupe, which sounds like a herd of animals. So, but it was the word troupe in French, herd, that interested me, because I was interested in what it meant in the collective consciousness, what kind of energy it conveyed. And I kept working on this, and I thought, well, what are these mermaids talking about? What is it they have to say? Women, desire, men's violence, voice, the women's voice, etc. We're going to make a leap in time to read the passage about the funeral. After the death of the narrator's mother, just after her death. A lot of words about death and funerals, and once again, there will be no translation.
Je redoutais d'y ressentir plus que nulle part ailleurs l'absence de ma mère. En fait, une fois passé la porte, j'ai été soulagée. Un apaisement immédiat, entier, m'a parcouru. J'étais là où je devais être. J'ai montré les lieux à Farrell en commençant par l'étage. En bas, dans la chambre de ma mère, je me suis allongée sur le lit et me suis endormie presque instantanément. Le peu de jour était tombé à mon réveil. Farrell avait fait un feu, il écoutait de la musique. Je me suis assise au bureau de ma mère. Un cadre en ivoire très travaillé était posé à plat sur la table. Il contenait une photo de moi à 12 ans, un portrait que je détestais, mais que ma mère adorait. Elle m'y trouvait un air très sculptural. Sur le mur perpendiculaire, 2 dessins, des portraits de ses parents réalisés par un artiste de rue pendant leur voyage de noces, des dessins au crayon, simples et beaux, le visage de mon grand-père de 3/4, tout en angle saillant, mâchoire en avant, pipe tenue entre les lèvres, celui de ma grand-mère de face, le trait beaucoup moins appuyé, presque effacé. La chevelure en cascade encadre le visage, le regard est fixe, la bouche droite et fine et fermée. Dans un meuble classeur en bois, quelques courriers, des cartes postales, un journal, un carnet personnel. Je n'ai lu que des débuts de phrases, replacé les objets là où je les avais pris avec méticulosité. J'ai ouvert le tiroir de droite, étroit et profond. Il contenait des paires de lunettes, certaines dans leur étui, d'autres sans protection. J'ai farfouillé dans la masse de verres et de branches et extirpé 2 ou 3 modèles que j'ai reconnus. Ma mère avait conservé là toutes les lunettes de sa vie. J'ai refermé le tiroir, j'ai enterré les lunettes. Pour le dîner, une grande table avait été réservée au bistrot des pêcheurs. La soirée a été chaleureuse. Farrell a pris le volant de voiture au retour. Le faisceau du phare balayait le brouillard à intervalles réguliers. Nous avons cherché à identifier le code en repérant la période et le rythme. Avant d'aller dormir, dans la salle de bain, je me suis lavé le visage à l'eau fraîche. J'ai observé son reflet dans le miroir. Est-ce que je ressemblais à ma mère? Un dépôt de dentifrice avait séché autour du bouchon que j'ai eu du mal à dévisser. À force de replier l'extrémité du tube sur elle-même, je suis parvenue à prélever un peu de pâte blanche. J'ai jeté le tube vide dans la corbeille. J'avais le pied sur le levier du couvercle, le tube recroquevillé gisait seul au fond, le dernier tube de dentifrice que ma mère avait utilisé ici, chez elle. J'ai relevé mon pied, le couvercle s'est refermé dans un bruit de mécanisme métallique et j'ai songé à tous ces moments à venir où j'allais faire mourir ma mère encore.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Qui rejoint ce que disait Nathalie Piégay au
I
tout
think
début
that
de
this
cette
brings us full
rencontre.
circle to what Nathalie Piégay was saying at the beginning of the session. Fighting against oblivion, the oblivion of memory. Is that why each of you wrote a book about your mothers? Yes, I think so.
Oui, il me semble que
I think I can't speak for you, obviously, but it seems to me that this is one of the purposes of writing, to record, to preserve, to conserve, not to revive or bring back to life, but to record and conserve. Conserve, preserve a type of memory. Perhaps it also represents or replaces mourning to a certain extent, now that we don't have religion to help us through. There aren't any new rituals that help us through our bereavement. So one is basically alone to cope. And there aren't any rituals to remember people by either on given days. So we can write, but writing is also a solitary endeavor. In conclusion, Colombe Boncenne, when you hold this book in your hands, do you feel like you have dispelled the fear of seeing your mother die over and over? No, but perhaps I have managed to maintain a sort of piece of her spirit. Thank you.
La parole est à vous pour les questions.
Now the discussion is open, or question and answer session. I know it's always difficult to ask a question, take the floor, at least ask the first question, but please go ahead, madam.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I
savoir si vous
would
avez
like to know
également
whether you
ressenti cette espèce de
also
renversement
felt
dans le rôle
a
mère-fille,
sort of
où à un
reversal
moment on devient
in your two
presque le parent
roles.
de celui qui part,
Was
dans
there
le
a
fait
moment
qu'on
when you no longer
l'accompagne,
felt like the
on
daughter but the mother?
rassure, voilà,
The mother is
je vais
dying,
vous en
you have to
parler un peu.
reassure her. I think the passage where the mother runs away from the hospital is just that, isn't it? The daughter has to tell the mother, has to scold the mother. She's the one who's called by the hospital, and she's responsible for scolding her mother. I mean, it's an anthropological reality, isn't it? Time is reversed, Nathalie. Often people who are dying regress back to their youth or their childhood. It's like it's a circle, it's a cycle of life. Death was almost like experiencing life or giving life, or an experience of birth or rebirth.
D'autres questions?
Any other questions?
Eh bien, si tel n'est pas le cas, vous
In
pourrez
that
prolonger
case,
peut-être la discussion
if
de
you'd
manière
like to
plus
continue this
informelle.
discussion
À
more
l'étage,
informally,
où vous allez toutes
let
les
me
deux
tell you that
dédicacer
upstairs,
vos livres,
both our authors are going to
la
be
librairie Basta.
signing their books, which are available on the table upstairs from Basta, the independent bookshop. Thank you.